Hi, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Today's Tuesday, so partway through the week. Hope everybody is had a good weekend and is having a good week so far. It's a fun week this week, big week with the NFL draft starting on Thursday, and I know it's going to be an interesting one this year with just not knowing what a lot of teams are going to do this year. So it should be exciting. I think we're all excited. I'm pleased to have a special guest with me today, Doug Kyed of NESN Patriots reporter covering pretty much all things Patriots and doing a lot of draft coverage lately. So I'm excited to have him here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing, Gabby?
Good. Yeah, doing well. We were just talking before the show started about how it's going to be a fun draft this weekend, and we're looking forward to all the possibilities.
Yeah, I love the draft. It's always really fun. It's usually around this time that I'm kind of just ready for it to happen. So these next 2 days couldn't go any faster for me. So I'm hoping these next 2 days kind of speed up a little bit so we know actually what happens in the draft now at this point.
Yeah, because I've seen so much on social media of people trying to just give their predictions on who's going to be taken when and everything like that. And at this point, I'm just like, I want the draft to happen now so that we can
Right.
actually see what teams end up doing because there's so many ideas being tossed around.
Yeah, I mean, from top to bottom, I think we have a pretty good idea of what the Jaguars and the Jets are going to do with the first two picks. It seems pretty likely that we know that the 49ers are going to take Mac Jones at number 3 overall, but some people, it feels like, haven't quite accepted that yet. Some people still think that Trey Lance is a possibility, maybe Justin Fields. But after that, it gets really interesting. And the Patriots picking at 15th is so different compared to past seasons. I
Yeah.
know that since I've been covering the Patriots since 2013, they haven't had this high of a pick. So it's definitely been a little bit different this year, just kind of going from the middle down rather than, looking at the first round of the NFL draft simply from the bottom, which is what I'm used to looking at it.
Yeah, it's an interesting pick this year for them, but I'm happy that they're picking at 15. I think that they could really do something very, very useful with that pick, especially because of the season that they had last year and just all of the transitions that they were going through and just all the holes that we really discovered. I feel like last year there's a lot of positions that can be addressed. So it's going to be interesting to actually see what they do with that pick.
Yeah, and they really have the flexibility to move up and down however they want. I mean, they could pretty easily get into the top 5, 10 picks this year. I'm not sure if that's actually what they'll do, but they have the flexibility to do that, picking at 15th, where they usually wouldn't at the end of the draft. And then they could also move down. They could possibly trade for players. So, yeah, they kind of have the whole board basically beyond those first 3 picks at their disposal. And it's really up to them to decide what they want to do with it.
Yeah. Do you think that them trading up to draft a quarterback, a lot of people are saying possibly Justin Fields. Do you think that that is something that Belichick would do? Because he's never really had to draft a quarterback in the first round because we were so spoiled for so long with Tom Brady that it's going to be interesting to see if that's actually something that he decides to do.
I think he would if the player was right. I think that he would be willing to take a quarterback in the first round. I think he might even be willing to trade up for a quarterback. I'd be a little bit surprised if the Patriots did trade up for Justin Fields. Just, I guess, for a number of reasons. I think that if by some chance the 49ers don't draft Mac Jones, you might see him fall a little bit, and then that might be a possibility for the Patriots to trade up. I wouldn't rule out trading up for someone like Trey Lance. But realistically, I think the most likely scenario is that the Patriots actually just stay put at 15. I don't think they do wind up trading up. I think that the quarterbacks probably come off the board a little bit too early and that the Patriots won't want to give up the draft capital for it. But like we were saying, it's at least on the table. That's at least a possibility for the Patriots. If something crazy does happen there at the top of the board with the quarterbacks, the Patriots have the ammo to move up if they want to.
Yeah, which is awesome. Just the number of good quarterbacks in this draft class. I think there's a lot of flexibility there, like you were saying, in terms of teams being able to just move draft positions if they want one of those quarterbacks. But I'm with you in the fact that I wouldn't want them to trade up and give up some draft picks to draft a quarterback just for the sake of a quarterback. I would only want that to happen if it's the quarterback that Bill feels like is actually the future of this team, because I mean, with Cam right now, it's only a 1-year contract, which to me really does seem like he's going to be a bridge to whoever comes in next. And if he's going to draft a quarterback, you want it to be somebody that you really trust could be the future. And that's a big decision. And so I wouldn't want him to just trade up just because people know that the Patriots need a quarterback.
For sure. And teams are so picky when it comes to quarterbacks. I would say that people would probably be shocked at the way that quarterbacks stack up on teams' draft boards. Like guys that you might expect to see in the top 5 or the top 20 or whatever it might be, might not even be on a draft board because these teams are so picky. It is the future of your franchise that you're picking there. So you absolutely want to take the right guy. You want to have the right pick there. And I would even go so far as to say that guys that you might expect to be a first round pick might not even be on some teams' boards just because that player doesn't necessarily fit what they're looking for in the system. I think that you're kind of seeing that with the 49ers this year. And if they really do take Mac Jones over someone like Justin Fields, I think that, most people on Twitter, most NFL fans, most of the media would put Justin Fields above Mac Jones. Even a lot of teams would put Justin Fields above Mac Jones, but it's all about what the 49ers want in their quarterback. And if they think that Mac Jones is the better fit, then that's the guy that they're going to bet on. That's the guy that they're going to take.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people. I know I have some friends that are 49ers fans that are saying they don't want Mac Jones and that they would much prefer having Trey Lance on the team. But I know Kyle Shanahan seems pretty sold on Mac Jones as of right now and that they're still interested in Trey Lance, but he kind of seems like the guy. And if that's who they want to take at the end of the day, then the 49ers fans have to trust that they do think that's the guy and they're willing to take him over some of the other quarterbacks that may be available. But the other nice thing about this draft is that there are other quarterbacks that will fall that can be drafted later. So for the Patriots, I feel like if they keep their pick at 15, they probably wouldn't take a quarterback at that point, and they might address another area that they feel they need to address. And then if they do want to draft a quarterback still, there might be some available later on that they feel might be a better fit for them.
Yeah, for sure. There's a few quarterbacks in the second round that I could possibly see the Patriots taking. Florida's Kyle Trask, Texas A&M's Kellen Mond, maybe Stanford's Davis Mills. I'm not the biggest Davis Mills guy, but I could understand if the Patriots would want to take him. And then there are some quarterbacks a little bit further down the board, but those are really the top 8 that you're looking at there. The top 5 quarterbacks that we were talking about in the first round, and then Trask, Mond, and Mills there in the second round. And there's even the possibility, we've been talking about the 49ers, there's a strong possibility that the 49ers could unload Jimmy Garoppolo as well. And then you're talking about a very interesting quarterback situation in New England, where then you basically have Cam Newton and Jimmy Garoppolo competing for that starting role in 2021, which, I don't think that it might create somewhat of an awkward dynamic in the Patriots locker room. But I think that if the Patriots are just looking to find the best quarterback situation possible, then you add as many names to that group as possible and then just see who wins out at that point.
Yeah. Do you think that that's a likely possibility? I know that you posted some things on Twitter about that scenario where the 49ers, if they draft a quarterback, just unloading Jimmy Garoppolo. Do you think that that's something that the Patriots would jump on immediately to get him as another quarterback option?
Yeah, I was actually talking to someone, kind of an executive from around the NFL, via text yesterday, and it was completely unrelated to Jimmy Garoppolo at the time. I was just asking him basically, which quarterback in the draft do you think the Patriots will wind up with? And he responded that, the quarterback that is most likely to wind up in New England out of all the draftable quarterbacks and the guys who are available would be Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'm not saying that means that there's like a above 50% chance of Jimmy Garoppolo landing in New England, but like say that there's a 100% chance that the Patriots add a quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo would essentially take up the biggest pie slice in that 100%. This is a bad analogy that I'm making here, but basically like, I think that there's a better chance that Garoppolo winds up in New England than Trask or Mond or Mac Jones or Justin Fields or Trey Lance. And like I said, that doesn't mean that there's a majority chance that Jimmy Garoppolo comes here, but that's probably the most likely quarterback who could be here just because the draft is such a crapshoot. We don't know who the Patriots actually like in the draft. We know that the Patriots like Jimmy Garoppolo. And if the 49ers make him available, which they probably should, I mean, they're paying him $25 million. I don't think you want to pay him that to be either a lame duck starter or a backup. So it makes sense for them to unload him. The Patriots still need a quarterback. The Patriots like Jimmy Garoppolo, and Jimmy Garoppolo should probably want to come to New England. So it all kind of fits together. It's just about making all those puzzle pieces work.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that Belichick really likes Garoppolo as a player, so I wouldn't be surprised if he does go after him at that point. And I was honestly, as soon as the 49ers traded up for the number 3 pick, that's originally at that point, I said, oh, I wonder if this means Jimmy G is going to end up in New England. Then I started hearing conflicting reports that he probably wasn't going to end up here because they re-signed Cam shortly after that. So I said, well, if they re-signed Cam, then maybe they don't feel like they need Jimmy Garoppolo at this point, and now they want to draft somebody. And that's really what I thought they were going to do. But it just seems like the 49ers pick is just going to say a lot, I feel like, about what's going to happen to everybody later on. And I agree with you. I think that it would be in their best interest probably to unload Jimmy G at this point. And if he does end up in New England, I mean, I like him. I like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that he is obviously a good player, and he knows the Patriots system, which I think is definitely beneficial for us to have. But it's hard because I still have trouble feeling like he could really be a long-term answer, but maybe that's not something that the Patriots are really prioritizing right now, and they're just looking for somebody that can immediately step into that starting role. And if you have 2 quarterbacks that know the system already, then that might be kind of what Bill's looking at right now.
Yeah, and I think that it would be helpful to have Cam Newton as well, even if he doesn't earn the starting role, just because, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo has been injured quite a bit during his career, only played 6 games last season, got injured even as a starter in New England. So having a guy, like you said, who knows the system, who was around last year, who's got tons of starting experience, former NFL MVP, if it wound up being that Cam Newton was Jimmy Garoppolo's backup, Cam Newton would probably also play a decent amount in 2021, just based off what Jimmy Garoppolo has done throughout his career as far as, staying healthy. So yeah, it's a good question about whether that would be a long-term answer. I think that at the very least, the Patriots could push that off for another few years. They could say, okay, well, this year we know we've got Garoppolo and Newton. Next year, if they keep him on the same contract, then Garoppolo would be under contract next season as well. And then maybe you go into next season looking for the quarterback. That being said, I'm not sure if the Patriots will be picking 15th overall again anytime soon. They really built up their roster this year. They should be much better. So if they do like a quarterback who's within range, it still makes a lot of sense to trade up, because if they're picking in the 20s next year or the 30s or whatever it is, then they won't have that same opportunity to move up. So I don't know. There's a ton of questions. It's really a tough dilemma to solve, but I do think that bringing in Garoppolo would, like I said, at least push that decision down the road a little bit, which might be the way that Bill Belichick is trying to, solve this situation.
Yeah, and with Belichick, I mean, we all know by now that there's always a method to his madness, and there's always some sort of strategy to everything that he does. And I feel like if he doesn't feel like there's a quarterback in this draft class that fits in with his system and the way that he operates and the way that he runs his team, then he wouldn't go after one of those quarterbacks. And Jimmy Garoppolo might be his answer for right now. And he might be like, yeah, I don't really like any of the quarterbacks in this draft class for us right now and what we're going for. And so if he doesn't draft a quarterback, if he doesn't trade up for a quarterback, then it is going to start to show me that maybe he doesn't have enough confidence in any of the quarterbacks in this class. Because I know that, they haven't really directly said we want this quarterback or this quarterback, but I know they've been expressing interest in some of them and just looking at some of them. I know Kyle Trask recently, they said, I saw a report saying that the Patriots were studying him. Mm-hmm. And so it just kind of shows me that if they don't trade up for a quarterback, then he's not super confident in any of the quarterbacks that he has available to him this year. And in that case, I have to just trust that he has a plan for that and that maybe in the future he'll address that situation.
Yeah, the Patriots have a really strict grading system all across the board, not only at quarterback, but really everywhere. So, yeah, I really don't think that they would force the issue at quarterback. And like you said, I mean, I honestly think there's a non-zero chance that one of those top 5 quarterbacks is still there at 15 and the Patriots pass on him and take someone else. I know that would drive Patriots fans insane. I know the Patriots fans love a lot of the quarterbacks in this class. They definitely like Fields and Lance and Wilson and Lawrence better than Mac Jones. But I see a possibility that one of those quarterbacks does fall a little bit. He's on the board for the Patriots at 15 and they still pass on him. I mean, it kind of happened there in 2018 with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was on the board for both of the Patriots picks at the end of the first round, and then they wound up taking Isaiah Wynn and Sony Michel. And, who knows if that was the Patriots won a Super Bowl by taking Sony Michel. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is a very good starting quarterback. I'm not sure how well he would have fit with New England, but we've seen that possibility happen before, so I wouldn't rule that out happening again this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I've been thinking about too is, a lot of people are talking about, well, this is the quarterback the Patriots are going to take at 15 if he falls. But in my head, I'm like, well, what if they don't take a quarterback at all? What if there isn't those quarterbacks available? There's still the possibility that he might not take that quarterback because he doesn't feel like that's the quarterback that he wants at the time. And I think that, like you said, that would make a lot of fans really, really irritated because we know that the quarterback situation does need to be addressed. But if he doesn't trust somebody like Mac Jones who falls to that position, then maybe he doesn't take them. And we have to just realize that what he's doing is what he feels is best. And he's not going to force the quarterback situation now if he doesn't like Mac Jones or he doesn't like whoever does fall. And I agree with you. I think that Mac Jones probably is who the 49ers are going to go with. But if they don't, then there is a likely possibility. I do feel like him more so than the others that he would be the one most likely to be around at that point in the draft.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the Patriots have passed on quarterbacks in the past when everyone thought they were going to take one. I mean, in 2018, I think it was, everyone expected the Patriots to take a quarterback pretty high. They wound up with Danny Etling, and I think it was the 7th round. Then last year as well, everyone thought the Patriots were going to take a quarterback pretty high. We analyzed all these quarterbacks the same way that we're doing it this year. And then they wound up signing 2 quarterbacks after the draft as undrafted free agents, and Brian Lewerke and Jamar Smith. So this certainly wouldn't be the first time that the Patriots did pass on a QB. I think that, at least from the comments that Robert Kraft made, he said earlier this offseason that the Patriots have to address the quarterback position for the future. So maybe he's putting a little bit more pressure on Bill Belichick to do something. And I would say that I would expect the Patriots to grab a quarterback at some point, either on the first or second day of the draft. And if it's not one of those top 5 picks, and if it's not Trask, Mond, or Mills, then my guess would be that it would be Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that they at least come out of the draft with either a developmental option at that position or someone who's been a proven starter in the NFL.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's what we all hope does happen, is that they do end up with somebody. And Jimmy Garoppolo, the only thing that concerns me is what you mentioned before, which was his injury history and just the fact that he just has had a lot of injuries in his career. But having Cam as his solid backup, if that were to be the scenario, I mean, I think overall I would be okay with that. If they came out of this draft and they ended up with Jimmy Garoppolo as the other guy, I don't think I would be super disappointed with that scenario.
Yeah, they'd at least be in a better situation than the 49ers were over the last few years when they had Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard behind Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, at least if you've got Cam Newton, he wasn't fantastic last season, but I do think that Cam Newton could take a pretty significant jump in 2021 just based on the weapons that the Patriots did add around him. His pass catchers are so much better than they were in 2020, and they're even so much better than the ones that Tom Brady had in 2019. And Tom Brady took a massive step forward from 2019 to 2020, at least statistically. And it's not like the Patriots added, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski, but I mean,
that would have been nice.
Yeah, seriously. With what they had last year, like adding Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith and Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, it's not bad. That's not far off as far as a jump from what they had last year to what they'll have next season.
Yeah. Do you think that because of all those moves that they made this offseason that they could be a playoff team in 2021? Do you think that they have enough? where they could be a playoff team this year, regardless of who their quarterback is?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they'll certainly be in playoff contention. I'm not sure if they've, narrowed that gap between them and the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East, but I think they could be a wild card team. I don't think that you're looking at them as being Super Bowl contenders or anything like that. I think that that would require them to have really good quarterback play, whether that is from Newton, Garoppolo, rookie quarterback, whoever it is. But I think that they'll at least improve on last year's 7-9 record. They were really competitive in even some of the games that they lost last season. So they've added so many pieces this offseason. They've improved so much on paper that it would be a disappointment, I'd say, if they don't finish this season 10-7 or 11-6, or I guess even 9-8. I think that they'll at least have a winning record this season. And if they do, then that'll put them in a pretty good spot for a playoff contention.
Yeah, I always, when I'm talking to people about it, I joke like, it can't really be much worse than last year. I mean, that they've gotten better and they made some adjustments. So they realistically, you can't really go downhill from there. The only way to really go is up. I agree with you though. I think Buffalo still should pretty handily win the division. Yeah. They're very good, and I do think that they will still win. But I think the Patriots definitely can be a wild card team with everything that they did this offseason. And I expected them obviously to make some moves because they knew that they had to. Did I expect him to go out and do all of that pretty much in one day? No, but I did expect them to make a decent amount of moves, especially with all the cap space that they had as well. And I think that Belichick did a good job of utilizing what he had available during free agency, and he was able to really go out and make the most of that.
Definitely. I even just the amount of players that they added, I wasn't expecting that. I expected them to spend up to the cap. I expected them to use all the cap space that they had, but I certainly wasn't expecting them to sign like 10 or 15 players or whatever it was. They really distributed their money pretty interestingly, where a lot of the free agents that they signed only have $1 million salaries in 2021. So Bill Belichick really tried to use that cap space as sparingly as possible to add as many players as he could this offseason, because I think that he does. He just wants to take that big leap forward this season. And I was saying this to someone else, but it was also, Robert Kraft was the one who was signing all those checks. He's the one who was spending all of that money. It's easy for Bill Belichick to say, okay, yeah, we're going to sign these 15 guys to these massive contracts. But Robert Kraft is the one who actually has to, sign off on all of those decisions. And I think that he looked at the team last year, wasn't happy with them finishing 7-9, wasn't happy with them finishing outside the playoffs, wasn't happy with the fact that they were out of the playoffs and Tom Brady was winning a Super Bowl. And I think that that's part of the reason why he was like, yep, all right, let's go all in. Sign anyone you want. I'll pay however much you want. And they really did. They paid out a ton in signing bonuses. And that's the way that they really were able to structure a lot of these contracts, is by paying them a lot upfront in signing bonuses and then lowering that salary so they could bring in as many players as possible.
Yeah, and I think they did a really good job of that. And I think, the tight ends, those were arguably the two best tight ends in the free agent class this year that they signed. So that's awesome. And if Cam is the starting quarterback, which obviously depends depending on what the quarterback situation ends up being, right. If he is the starter, then it really is there's going to be a lot of pressure on him this year to really show that he still has it, because it was really hard to watch him last year. And granted, there were a lot of circumstances there in terms of last year and him not having the best circumstances to be able to succeed last year. It was a weird season, and with him getting COVID and just all these other factors and him not having a lot of the weapons. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt for now, but now that he has the help, if he is the starter, he has to really show that he still has it this year, because I'm having a hard time really feeling like he fully does, because there were times when some of the problems were on Cam last year.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Cam's an interesting player to talk about because he has his major fans and defenders, and then he also has a lot of people who kind of unfairly malign him, I would say. The people out there who think that he can't complete a pass or that he's throwing the ball at the dirt every snap. It's just not true. I mean, he completed 67.9% of his passes or whatever it was last season. Obviously, his touchdown to interception ratio wasn't great last season, 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, but he did have the rushing touchdowns. At the same time, he does definitely have to play better. And I think that he will 100% be helped by the weapons that the Patriots added. He had a lot of success with Greg Olsen with the Carolina Panthers. So I think that it does make a lot of sense to bring in guys like Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. And that also just takes the pressure off of the wide receiver core as well. If both those tight ends are on the field for 80, 90% of snaps, then it's fine if Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers or Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne are your starting wide receivers, because you don't necessarily need top names at that position. I would still say that the Patriots probably have one of the worst wide receiver cores in the NFL. But if you look at their pass catchers as a whole, and you throw James White and you throw the 2 tight ends in there, they're probably about the middle of the pack, which is, as we were saying before, significantly better than it was last season when they had Ryan Izzo at tight end and they had, N'Keal Harry at wide receiver and James White was missing games. It was just really a complete disaster with what they had to deal with last season.
Yeah, I know. It was really just not good. I mean, watching
rough at times.
was just so frustrating every single game. So I was like, there's just no help here. This is just bad. I mean, this is going to be a key off season for this team, but you're right. They did do a lot, and N'Keal Harry, that whole situation is just disappointing because when they drafted him, I thought he was going to be so much better than he was. I mean, he was good in college, and then they draft him, and everybody had such higher expectations for him than he met during these past few seasons. So it's really disappointing just watching him play because I just had such high hopes for him coming in.
Yeah, it's been strange. I feel like it's weird that he was the pick, that they haven't taken a first-round wide receiver in Bill Belichick's tenure as head coach until they grabbed N'Keal Harry. They grabbed this big-bodied wide receiver who can make contested catches, and the strength of his game is his power. And then they're using him on end-arounds, and they're using him on screens, and they're using him on these shallow passes. It's weird that they put so much draft stock into taking him, and then once they get him in the system, it feels like they don't really know what to do with him, which just feels so strange. But I'm not quite sure what happens with the N'Keal Harry. I think that as it stands right now, even after Julian Edelman's retirement, he's the number 4 wide receiver on the depth chart right now. You've got to put Aguilar, Myers, and Bourne all above him. So he's got a lot to prove this offseason if he's even on the team. I think that it's still possible that they could trade him as well. I think the Patriots would probably want somewhere around a 4th-round pick for him. The fact that he hasn't been dealt yet probably shows that they haven't been getting those offers. But, I mean, even say that, he makes it through the draft and is still on the team, but the Patriots take a wide receiver either in the 1st or 2nd round. If they grab someone like Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith or Diami Brown, one of these top wide receivers, then you might even see N'Keal Harry competing for a spot on the Patriots in training camp, because you can only keep so many wide receivers around. You've got to throw Gunnar Olszewski into the mix as well. You know that he's going to be the punt returner after being a Pro Bowler last season. So I don't know. It's a make or break offseason for N'Keal Harry, whether he's on the Patriots or not. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see how that all turns out too, because I know that they have said that they're open to discussions to trade him. But yeah, I agree. I think they probably just haven't gotten those types of offers yet for him. So maybe he doesn't get traded, and maybe he's still here and just has to prove himself and prove that he has a spot. But I do think the Julian Edelman situation does change some of that. I'm going to miss him a lot too. Now it's kind of all the OGs that aren't there anymore. So
it is really weird. Like I started covering this team in 2013. And there are barely any players left from that year. You're talking about like Matthew Slater, Dante Hightower, Brandon Bolden's back in the mix. But I mean, the list is really diminishing. The guys who came in that year, like Daron Harmon, Logan Ryan, Patrick Chung's gone. It's just all these guys are gone at this point. Obviously, Brady, Gronkowski. It really is a new team. And I think that the Patriots could miss some of that leadership in their offense that Julian Edelman brought. He was never a captain, but he was just that no-nonsense guy that really wouldn't allow guys to think about anything other than football during the game. He was the one who kept everyone on their toes. He was the one who kept everyone serious. And the leadership that was around for all those Super Bowl teams on offense is almost completely gone at this point. You're talking about David Andrews, obviously still at center, James White still at running back, but otherwise it's almost an entirely new group on offense from the one that won those last 3 Super Bowls for the Patriots.
I know, which is sad, and definitely really strange. But Edelman, yeah, his personality and just the way that he kept everybody focused is something I think that they will miss, and that they'll find is something that's going to be hard to replace. I mean, he's just a special guy, and he's somebody that's going to always kind of go down as a Patriots legend for us fans, I think. But you know, it's a new group now, and it's kind of a fresh start almost for the team. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also a good sign that a lot of the players were really happy that they brought back Cam, because I think he's really well liked in the locker room among the team, and that's really, really important. Just all of their reactions on social media that I saw when they brought Cam back, that makes a difference. If you really, really respect somebody in the locker room like that, then that does make a difference, I think, in the way that you play. And the fact that they all really value Cam and his presence, I think, is really important to the success of this team.
Yeah, and it seems like they've all been getting along this offseason as well. They had that Pat's West camp out in Orange County with Stidham and Newton kind of leading the group. But, you know, a lot of the players were out for that. And Kendrick Bourne was out for that. You saw Jonnu Smith out there, Hunter Henry. And then a lot of the guys have been around for OTAs as well. There's been pictures of them, you know, on social media. So it seems like this new group of players is already meshing well with the guys who were already on the Patriots last season. So I think that that's important, especially this season where, you know, the organized team activities and the organized workouts won't be quite as populated as they were in years past, just because, you know, the pandemic's still going on. So it is important for these guys to get together on their own as much as possible, just so that they can connect outside of the facility.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that for sure. That's gonna help a lot, and especially with a lot of the new players being there, and just it's important for them to be able to connect kind of, you know, at this point with everything. And the pandemic just kind of threw a damper and everything, but I think it's really good. I agree with you. It's really good that they're doing these workouts and they're connecting. And the receiving core, obviously, as you mentioned, is still something that I wonder if that's something that they would address early in the draft or not. Because if they don't go with a quarterback at 15, who do you think that you would like to see them go for in that position if it's not a quarterback? Do you think that wide receiver is something that they would prioritize early, or do you think that that's something that he would address later on?
I think that it's one of the few positions on the team where if you drafted someone at 15, then they could become an immediate starter. So if Devontae Smith falls, if Jalen Waddle falls, if for some reason Jamar Chase falls, I think that any of those guys could immediately be thrust into a starting role in the Patriots offense. If one of those guys doesn't fall, and I could definitely see the Patriots addressing that as well. I think that would be a position they would be interested in. Outside of that, I think offensive line would be a position what they would look for at that number 15 spot. I know that it's not an immediate need, and I do expect the Patriots to pick up Isaiah Wynn's 5th-year option, but Trent Brown will be a free agent after this season. So the Patriots will be looking for offensive tackle help in the future. They can move Michael Owenu back to right tackle, but then they would need a guard. So one guy that does have the versatility who could play guard or tackle at that spot would be USC's Elijah Vera-Tucker. I'd say that if the Patriots stand pat at 15, he's probably the player that would have the highest probability of being drafted by the Patriots at 15. That's kind of the guy that I would expect them to take. And obviously anything can happen. They can move up, they can move down, players could fall. But if they do stand pat at 15, and if he's available, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they did take Elijah Vera-Tucker out of USC. He's a guy who can play tackle, he can play guard, a little bit undersized, but really fits what the Patriots usually look for on their offensive line.
Yeah, I definitely, based on seeing him play when he was in college, I could see the way that he would fit in with the Patriots system and kind of their offense and the needs and just the way that offense is run. I could see him kind of fitting in with that their whole system in general. I think that he would be a good fit here. And I mean, I would not be opposed to that though. If they end up picking him at 15, I think that would be a good, solid addition to the offense, because I know everybody's all quarterback, 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 but we have to remember that there are so many other things that they can do with that pick that will also improve this team, even if it's not a quarterback. And I think that he would be somebody that could really fit in here and down the line be a really beneficial addition. So I think that if they were to take him with that pick, that's another thing I think I'd be able to accept and be okay with right now, because we know that there's other routes that they can take that will continue to improve and grow this team. And it's not just quarterback or bust, even though we'd all love to see a quarterback with that pick. But I'm on the same page with you with that. I think that he would be somebody that we could really add to this team that could fit in and make an impact. And those are the types of players that Belichick's looking for, whatever position that those may be at. But this draft this year is definitely an interesting one, just because there's so many teams with question marks that you don't really know what a lot of the teams, even with the 49ers on, really, there's just a lot of teams that aren't set in stone yet. So I think that there's a lot teams moving around. I think that we could see a lot of that this year, but I think I have to just trust that Belichick, whoever he does go with that 15 pick, is somebody that he really sees being a long-term valuable player for this team. Because like you touched on earlier, we don't know if the Patriots are going to be able to pick at 15 for a while after this. So we know that whoever he does pick in that slot is obviously going to be somebody that he really trusts, that he sees being a valuable fit long-term for this offense.
Yeah, you can't miss when you're picking at 15. It's a lot easier to excuse a miss when you're picking 32nd every year or down at the bottom of the first round, just because it's so much more unpredictable down there. But yeah, I mean, I think that offensive line it would be a safe pick. I think that, if they do wind up grabbing Elijah Vera Tucker, I think that is a safe pick, but that's not always the worst thing. I think it probably makes sense to take as safe of a pick as possible at 15. If you know that player can contribute, and if you know that he's going to fit in your system, and if you know that he's got the versatility to move around if you need him to, I think that, I don't think it's a place where you necessarily should be taking risks on a team that should be competitive in the next couple of years, where, you need someone to help your team. I think that should probably be their aim. They essentially is to take it as safe of a pick as possible that can at least contribute to your team in the next 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many players that could fit into that realm this year. And I'm so happy they're picking early, because it couldn't come at a better time for them to be picking early in the draft this year. Sure. Considering everything, their season last year and the circumstances, COVID and everything else, this is just a really good year to be picking that high up in the draft. And I think that there's just a lot of possibilities there, and whoever he does pick, we know is going to be somebody that he sees something in longer term for the next few years. And I think that's that's going to be a great feeling to have. I'm just trusting the system, as I like to say, and just trusting whoever he does pick, that even if they aren't making an impact right away this year, there's somebody that could, after this year especially, make a difference to this team, for the next few years to come after that. But I think overall with the Patriots, considering everything that they did this offseason and considering their draft possibilities, I think after this draft ends and, we go on with the rest of the offseason and then this season starts, I think in that time span, a lot of us will be able to sit here and feel a lot better about where the Patriots are at than we were at the end of last season.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even just with all the moves that they made in free agency, I kind of touched on this earlier, there's not a lot of immediate needs on this team. I mean, their defense, their starting defense is pretty much set at this point, unless they wind up trading Stephon Gilmore or JC Jackson. Their offense is pretty much set. It's essentially about adding depth, or like I said, just kind of planning for the future to plug in a starter for the future there. So they can essentially take the best player that they see fit and who's available at number 15 overall, and they don't really have to force anything by trying to find an immediate starter because they've got the edge defenders there and Kyle Van Noy and Matt Judon. They're getting Dante Hightower back. Their defensive line has been reconstructed a decent amount. They've still got a strong secondary. So overall, their starting lineup is pretty much set. Now it's just about adding in those kind of ancillary pieces to strengthen their team as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. And I know there's been mixed feelings on this too. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about adding that 17th game. Because I know some people like it and some people don't like it, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that and just how you think it's going to impact teams like the Patriots.
It's definitely interesting. It increases the chances that you're not going to have everyone at the end of the season. You throw another game in there and there's another chance for major injuries or season-ending injuries, which that just kind of adds another element of chance to the NFL season. And we've seen throughout the years that when the Patriots stay healthy, they're really good. And then in years like 2015 or 2017, when they lose some players, they don't wind up winning a Super Bowl. They don't wind up being as solid. So I'd say that that's one of the biggest things, is that it just adds a little bit of more of an element of chance to the season. I'll see how I feel about the 17th game. I wonder if we'll even really notice it as the season goes along, because you're really only adding in one other week. I'll say that I wasn't the biggest fan of having the 7 playoff games last year. I thought that it just became a little bit too much with how many playoff games were in that first weekend. And for people like us who are, sports craved and love watching any football game that you possibly can, it was good. It was great. But I do think that there could become a lack of interest if the NFL tries to throw too many games out there, too many playoff games. I wonder if there would eventually be an element of there being too much of a good thing. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I don't know. They do seem to be kind of pushing their luck by increasing the regular season games and the playoff games.
Yeah, I thought it was a little too many playoff games last year too. And obviously I love playoff football. There's nothing else like it. And it's fun watching those games every year and everybody gets so excited for it. But too much really is a real thing. And if there is too much of that, then people might start to lose interest in some of those later first round games. And I think that, I didn't really lose interest during those games. And I think it's probably because it was the first year they had it. So I was intrigued by how that was actually going to go. But if that were something, that were to continue, I don't know how I would feel about having that many games in that first weekend. I think that was something that I don't know that would necessarily work long term. And when it comes to the extra week of the regular season, I was kind of feeling like you in terms of, I might not even notice it. It's only one extra game. Like right. I might even forget about it and just not even be thinking about it really. And then obviously if the Patriots are a bubble team and that 17th game is kind of the make or break week for if they make the playoffs or not, then obviously I'm going to be okay with it. Because it would be an extra chance for them to get into the playoffs. Right. But if they've clinched a playoff spot before that week, then I might feel like, this is a little unnecessary. I don't know if we really need this 17th game, but I'm curious how it's going to go this year since they're trying it for the first time. And I'm curious to see overall if fans end up liking it better or not, because in the grand scheme of things, one extra week doesn't seem like that much, but it might end up just being a little too much because we're so used to, the 16 games, and after week 17 of that regular season, everybody's just ready to go for the playoffs and everybody's ready to see some good games. And then It might throw people off a little bit like, there's still actually another week of the regular season now that we're not used to.
Yeah, I think that I don't know how the schedule is really going to be constructed, but I think that the final week of the season now is going to be in early January. So that is, when you would be used to seeing the playoffs starting, and it is going to be a little bit weird to be like, all right, one more game, and then we get to the playoffs. But I don't know. I was against it. I thought they probably should have kept 16 games. But ultimately, that's just because I'm thinking about what's best for the players. I know that the players were kind of torn on whether or not they should add the 17th game, but if it works out well for them, if they wind up getting paid more in the future, then ultimately it's probably a plus. But it was an interesting thing that just kind of it seems like it got thrust on the players without them fully accepting it or fully being supportive of it.
Yeah, I agree with that because I know that obviously the players were giving their input on it and they just were not completely sold on the idea. And I just felt like the decision was made without taking a lot of that into consideration. And you bring up a really good point with injuries because it's one of those situations where you could end up not having some players for the playoffs because of that week. And that would be really, really disappointing if you lose some of your key players because they added that extra week of the regular season and you don't get them when the playoffs come around because of that reason. And so I would hate to see that happen either for any team, obviously, and just having just an extra opportunity for having an injury and just having to sit out for the postseason.
Yeah, because I mean, you could see that final week of the season, if playoff seeds are clinched or whatever it is, then it might wind up looking like a preseason game anyway for some of these teams. I'm thinking about, like, would the Chiefs really put Patrick Mahomes out there if they've clinched their playoff spot? Would the Buccaneers put Tom Brady out there? So yeah, it I don't know. I mean, I guess it wouldn't be that different from a week 16, but yeah, just the more games you're playing, there is the higher probability that players are going to get injured, which is obviously ultimately a negative to adding the 17th game.
Yeah, I am interested in seeing how it goes, and I'm interested to see how I end up liking it actually during the season.
Right.
And it's something that I end up being happy about or not. And I think there's still going to be mixed feelings on it, even at that point. But it's going to be interesting to see how people react to it when the season actually is maybe midway through and people are starting to remember that there's still that extra game. I'm going to be curious to see what the reactions are to it at that point because I think they're going to be very, very mixed still at that point.
Definitely. And I mean, it seems like the Patriots are going to get the Cowboys added to their schedule, which we'll see how that goes for them. I think that, the Cowboys finished, third in their division, but that was also without Dak Prescott for most of the year. So it'll also just be interesting to see how the Cowboys are this season with Dak Prescott back. And if that winds up being an advantage that the Cowboys are added, or if it winds up being a disadvantage if they're significantly better in 2021 than they were in 2020.
Yeah, I told a lot of people this, that I really think that not having Dak hurt them really significantly, and I think they are going to be better with him this year. I think they could have won their division last year had he been starting every game. And so I think that they're going to be in a much better place this year. I mean, they still have defensive issues that they need to address, but I think that they are going to be a better team this year with him starting. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that kind of makes or breaks the Patriots, having them added to their schedule. But I mean, they play Tampa this year too. That's going to be, first of all, exciting because it's going to be Brady's return to Foxborough, but it's also going to be obviously one of their toughest games of the season.
Yeah, that's going to be the one that everyone is circling on the schedules. I'm curious to see, at what point in the season that game is played. I would have guessed probably about mid-season, just to make it as important as possible. But I mean, no matter when that game is played, it's probably going to be the highest rated game of the season. And it's fascinating that that's at Gillette too. And obviously, it would be meaningful if it was played in Tampa. But just the fact that Tom Brady is already coming back to Foxborough this season. That's going to be absolutely the most must-watch game of the season, probably, across the NFL this year.
Yeah, I'm so excited for it. I mean, it's going to be the anticipation is it's definitely going to be. It's going to be weird to see Brady at Gillette in a different uniform because it was weird enough seeing him in a different uniform this past season as it was, but especially in a different uniform at Gillette Stadium is going to make it even weirder for us, I think.
It's going to be bizarre for him, I would imagine, too. Just like being in the visiting locker room, coming back. And just the fact that it's so soon, too, because if it was in a few years, then maybe it might be a little bit different for him. But just the fact that it's, 1 year after he left is, it's going to be bizarre. And I'm sure that I'm curious to see how Patriots fans react. I think that we probably will be seeing full stadiums this year, which is good for that game and good that we're kind of progressing up to that point already. But I would imagine the Patriots fans will be incredibly supportive of Tom Brady, but I wonder how much the fans will even be split at that point, depending on how the Patriots are doing whether they are cheering for Tom Brady or whether they are cheering for the Patriots, or what that dynamic is going to be like in the stadium for that game.
I know. I've been thinking about that too, because I feel like what the Patriots' record is at that point, whenever that game is, might be a factor in who people root for in that game. I know that I'm going to root for the Patriots regardless, because I'll always support Tom Brady, and I was rooting for him in the Super Bowl last year. Yeah. But to me, it's always Patriots first, and then it's everything else after that. So I'll still be rooting for the Patriots, but I'm going to want it to be a good game and a close competitive game. But that Bucs team is really good. I mean, they could go to the Super Bowl again this year.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they brought back basically their entire team. They haven't re-signed Antonio Brown yet, but that team is still absolutely loaded, and they definitely made an attempt to bring back as much of that roster as possible to make sure that they are competitive again in 2021. So yeah, I mean, we could see Brady adding an 8th ring this season. It's already pretty wild what he's done, but if he could bring them back to the Super Bowl again, it would be, yeah. I mean, like, you run out of superlatives for Tom Brady at a certain point.
Yeah, you really do. Do you think that Kansas City is still should be the favorite in the AFC? I mean, there's a lot of good teams that we've seen kind of come through, and I think that Cleveland was a little bit of a surprise team last year, and they've gotten better, so I think they're going to be pretty good this year. And Buffalo still, obviously, but do you think that the Chiefs are still the best team in the AFC, and kind of your early favorite in terms of to come out of the AFC and maybe go to the Super Bowl, pending obviously injuries?
I think so. I think that they've done a pretty good job of rebuilding that offensive line this offseason as well, trading for Orlando Brown and then also signing Joe Thuney. So that was big for them, because that was such an issue last season for them in the Super Bowl, obviously. So I think that they did a good job with rebuilding their offensive line. They've kept their team together pretty well. But yeah, I think that gap might be narrowed a little bit in the AFC. Like you said, the Cleveland Browns could certainly be competitive. The Baltimore Ravens are always up there. I think the Buffalo Bills will be really good again this season. It was big that they were able to hold on to their offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll. I think that could have been a different story if they had lost him as a head coach to another team. Patriots are on the rise. So yeah, I mean, AFC South, I don't know if the Colts or the Titans or if they're going to be quite as competitive with the Chiefs, but I think that gap might be narrowed a little bit in the AFC, but the Chiefs would still probably be the favorites just because they do still have Mahomes. They were able to rebuild the offensive line, and obviously they still have Andy Reid as their head coach as well.
Yeah, I mean, I am curious to see how Carson Wentz does with the Colts. I think that's going to be interesting, and I do think that's a good fit for him. But I don't see them being a real serious threat to the Chiefs or anything like that. But I am curious kind of in seeing how they do with him as their quarterback, because obviously he had a rough go in Philly, but I think that he's in a better situation now. So that's going to be fun to see. I mean, the Jets are going to be the Jets still, I think.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, they have a good head coach now, which I think is a good step in the right direction.
Definitely.
But I think that there's still so much more work that they need to do. The Dolphins, if Tua can play better, I think they could be a really good team. It's just a matter of, is he going to have the same type of season that he had last year, or is he going to improve this year and play better? Because the Dolphins, I still kind of worry about them in this division for the Patriots a little bit. I think that the Patriots could beat them this year. I just think that for them, if Tua has a better year this year, then they could be really good.
Yeah, it all really depends on Tua, because I think they were really helped last year by Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was able to come in and really help them win some games. Late in games, he was able to come in the fourth quarter and kind of bail out Tua a little bit. So it all does depend on Tua, because otherwise I feel like they treaded water a little bit this offseason. I don't think that they got significantly better in any area. I don't think they really got significantly worse, but there's going to be the dividing line is at quarterback. Like I said, Ryan Fitzpatrick was helping them out a lot last season. Tua did struggle as a rookie, but if he is able to take that next step forward and become a top 15, top 12, whatever his quarterback this season, then yeah, they might be right up there with the Buffalo Bills. It really all does just depend on his development.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun division to watch this year, and even more exciting than last year because the Patriots will be very much more in the mix this year, I think.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun to see those division matchups because, they always play close games with those teams. And so it's going to be fun to watch them this year with everything that they did this offseason and just see how they play against the rest of the division because they're going to be much more competitive this year with the division, and I think it's going to be fun to finally see the I say finally, it's been 1 year that the
I
Patriots
know.
have been off year, to see the Patriots, kind of start to be on the winning side again, and hopefully, and just see how everything goes this season, and I'm super excited for this weekend as well.
Yeah, I think it also helps that just the division is more competitive than it was for many of the years that the Patriots were obviously winning that division. Just the fact that the Bills are coming in as the top dogs, as the front runners, is such an odd dynamic in the AFC East. So the Patriots are kind of, they played that nobody believes in us card for so many years.
Yeah,
and now this year it actually might apply for them. So that in itself will be a little bit fascinating.
Yeah, I agree for sure, and it's definitely fun, and I like that the Bills are good. It just increases the competitiveness aspect when it comes to the division and those types of matchups, and I think it's going to be a good year for the Patriots. I have really high hopes, and I think they have a lot that they can do with their draft picks. So I think it's going to be fun to see how Thursday goes and just the days that follow that.
Definitely, I'm certainly excited for the draft. Excited to see what happens. I hope that Patriots fans get everything that they want and they get that rookie quarterback and everything. But we'll all just kind of have to see how it shakes out and see how the moves at the top of the board affect how the Patriots make their pick at 15. But certainly going to be an interesting night and an interesting weekend for the Patriots.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think everybody's super excited, and we all feel it now because it's so close. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see what they do and see reactions throughout the draft and just how people are feeling about certain things. And just I'm excited. I'm really excited. It's going to be a fun draft this year.
Definitely, I agree.
Well, I appreciate you joining me on the show. It definitely was a fun conversation, and I look forward to kind of seeing your thoughts during the draft. I think that's going to be fun, and what you're putting out on Twitter about just kind of the moves that are being made and who teams are picking at each pick, and it's going to be fun. But I appreciate you joining, and I appreciate everybody for tuning in every week. You know where to find Boston Balling. It's on all podcast streaming platforms and social media, so you can find it that way. And I'll catch you all next week with the Patriots and the NFL draft being over. So to be exciting. So everyone have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next time.